We continue with our Lenten series on Jesus as the Lord of the Sabbath. This is Lord of Holiness or Lord of Sanctity. In the creation story, we're told that, the first day of creation, God saw that it was good. The second day of creation, God saw that it was good. Through all the first 6 days, God saw that it was good, that the creation of the land, the creation of the water, the creation of animals and human beings, God saw that it was good. But the seventh day, the Sabbath, when God rested, God hallowed it and made it holy. So when Jesus is identified as the Lord of the Sabbath, he's the Lord of holiness. Jesus came that we may grow up into holiness, as it says in 1 Peter. What did you want to be when you were growing up? A police chief? Did you want to be a choir director? Did you want to be a firefighter? I wanted to be center fielder for the Reds. That was my goal. I wanted to be center fielder for the Reds. Some of us wanted to be teachers. Some of us wanted to be a mother or father. Some of us wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer. I wanted to be center fielder for the Reds. And I was sure I could do it. What do we want for our kids to be when they grow up? When somebody says, what do you want for your kids? What do you answer? Most of the time we answer, I just want my kids to be happy. I want my kids to be happy. Sometimes we want our kids to be safe. My goal for my children is that they all have health insurance coverage. That's the goal for my children. They're a success if they've reached that. Not too often do you hear, I want my children to be good, or I want my children to be moral. Almost never, I can't remember if I've ever heard it, I want my children to be holy when they grow up. What? Are you a religious nut? I want my children to be holy. Holy is a word that tends to have negative connotations in our language. Holier than thou. Holy Joe. I mean, frankly, if somebody goes around saying, they want to be holy, likely they're going to get beaten up or pushed in the mud. How do we, it's a word we don't really even use much. Holy cow, holy four-letter word. We just don't use the word that much. We avoid it. What is holy? Well, one writer says, to be holy is to be a light bearer. Well, that's okay. That's okay. She's a light bearer. When she enters the room, it lights up. Well, that's a neat kind of image of holy. Another person says it's to be a life giver. Well, that's a neat definition of holy also. Giving life. We like to be around people who give life. Holy, H-O-L-Y, is related to the word whole, W-H-O-L-E. People who are holy are whole. I think it was in fourth grade when we learned fractions. Remember fractions? Oh, Lord. Integers, whole numbers, integers, were kind of fun. I mean, you could handle 1, 2, 3, 4, 12, 13, 14, and you could add whole numbers pretty easily. 13 plus 12 is 26. You could do that. Just seeing if you could listen, if you were listening. But whole numbers were easy to add. And you thought, oh man, I got this math thing whipped. And then they introduced fractions, where you had to add 12 and 4/5 plus 13 and 7/8. Oh my God. And then you had to add fractions and subtract them and multiply them and divide them. And we were just defeated by fractions. Oh Lord, give me the whole numbers again. Make life easier. Fractions are hard. Whole numbers are easy, integers. And the word that comes from integer is integrated. Integrated is a whole person. It's a whole society. It's a whole country. There are no fractions that are divided out or excluded, that are pieces. And I think, is my life a whole integrated existence? Or are there fractions of me that are so annoying? I'm fractioned. I'm fragmented. I'm not wholly loving all the time. I have this grudge going on in the back. I'm not wholly patient all the time. I've got this control need where Susan isn't doing what I want now. I'm not wholly forgiving because I remember what they did. And so I'm fractioned. And, we have that experience sometimes. We're talking to someone or someone's talking to us, and we're not wholly present to them because we're thinking about, oh, so-and-so walked by, I need to talk to so-and-so, or, oh, I've got to do this when I get home from church, and I'm not listening to the person in front of me, or I'm not wholly present. So we live lives as fractions, and we're not wholly, either way you spell it. And I would love to be wholly forgiving, wholly loving, wholly patience, because my life would then be wholly at peace, and I would be full. So when I understand wholly in terms of wholeness, it starts to appeal to me. I might not want it to have been holy when I was growing up, but I do want to be wholly loving and wholly forgiving and wholly compassionate. I want to be a whole person. And as hard as I work at that, I don't do it. The harder I work, the more I realize the more distant holiness is. There was a really interesting interview a couple weeks ago on NPR. Terry Gross interviewed John Oliver. And, she asked him, what did you do growing up? And he said, I think the instrument he played was the cello. He said, I used to play the cello. And she said, were you any good at it? And he said, I practiced really hard, and I thought I was good at it. But the more I worked at it, the more I realized I would never achieve what I wanted to do because I just didn't have the ear and I just didn't have the coordination. And she said, I realized the same thing about playing the piano when I took piano lessons. The better I got, the more I realized how distant being an excellent pianist was. I just didn't have it. As hard as I worked, I just didn't have it to excel and be a concert pianist. And she said it was just strange. The better I got, the more I realized it was further away from me. And sometimes I think that's what holiness is, this being wholly loving and wholly forgiving and wholly compassionate. The harder I work at it, the more I realize I'm never going to attain it on my own. You know, holiness is something I can't achieve. It comes from God. That's what God is, holy. And so to be whole will be a gift from God. And God will allow me and make me and gift me to be whole. I played high school basketball, and our team was stunningly mediocre. And we never beat Dayton Dunbar. Just couldn't do it. And we were playing at Dunbar, and our coach was going through his pep talk, and he was going through every imaginable cliche in the book. And he got to, and boys, they put their pants on one leg at a time, just like you do. And my friend said in a voice that he didn't mean to be heard, but coach, it's a different pair of legs. And that was our problem. We could have practiced 24/7, and we just didn't have the legs. We didn't have the material. Holiness gifts us, in a sense, with a different pair of legs, a different sense of matter. C.S. Lewis says, it's like God comes to our house to fix the leaky faucet and to fix the pipe that rattles. And what God ends up doing is fixing the leaky faucet and the pipe that rattles, and we appreciate that. But then God starts knocking out walls and throwing out porches and adding additions to the room and adding a floor and adding a story. And he says, God isn't coming just to fix the cottage of our lives. God is coming to build our lives into a palace, into a castle, because God intends to live in it. And that's what holiness is. God coming to live. Lewis goes on to say, Christians of all people should believe in evolution. For evolution is that quantum step in creation where something becomes something different. You know? And he says, in evolution, we look at that and we'd say, as we looked at humanoids as they evolved, we thought they'd be stronger and more muscular, but the next step was brainier, something we didn't anticipate. And he says, well, Christ is the next step in evolution, and it's not going to be brainier, it's going to be more spiritual, where the person is wholly loving and wholly Christ-like and wholly forgiving and whole. We settle for too little. We settle for being rich. We settle for being the police chief. Not that there's anything wrong with that. We settle for being a minister. We settle for being a teacher. But what God has in mind for us is not even that we be good. That's settling. It's that we be fully alive and fully light bearers and fully light givers. The rabbis say that on the Sabbath, when God rested, the Sabbath was the day that God gave the world a soul. It's the day when God gave the world spirit. It's the day when God gives human beings spirit and life and God's self. When Jesus says he's the Lord of the Sabbath, he's saying, I'm going to give you that spirit. I'm going to give you the spirit of peace and the spirit of mercy and the spirit of compassion. You're not going to be a fraction anymore. You're not going to be pieces of this and pieces of that. I have in mind that you will grow into a different person that will soar and be good and be a teacher and be a firefighter, but you will be whole. I'm going to assume you haven't grown up yet. So what do you want to be when you grow up? May you be whole. May you follow the Lord of the Sabbath and accept his gift. Amen.